Chapter 61.1. Upon seeing a comrade bleeding and falling, the other swordsman froze in shock. What did I just witness? Being from the same swordsmanship guild, they knew exactly what their colleague had done. It was a common technique across various guilds to deflect an overhead attack and then counterstrike. But why couldn't he block it? In the midst of the chaos, Gasro barely managed to reach a conclusion. This foe is extraordinarily strong. Do not engage directly with his weapon. Gasro had seen it clearly. When the mace was swung, it exploded outward like an arrow shot from a bow. Unbelievable as it was. If the opponent had superhuman strength, then what they had just witnessed made sense. Even if it was hard to believe, when there's only one possible explanation, you have to accept it. The swordsman glared at Johann, pondering their options. Knightly swordplay, often passed down within families, varied regionally. Typically involving combat in armor, it didn't focus much on intricate techniques. But there were limits, and they had never seen a technique that simply overpowered with sheer strength. Skill overcomes strength. A phrase they had heard often, but it had never felt as hollow as it did now. Can skill truly prevail against overwhelming power? Johann also observed the swordsman. The recent fight had been unexpected for Johann too. He thought they would have exchanged more blows. Those who faced Johann treated him as an equal. But that was an irreversible mistake. One should face Johann as if facing a monster. A human-shaped monster. A monster capable of tearing one apart with brute strength. The swordsman's overt caution was palpable. Their readiness to retreat at Johann's charge was evident. A moment of standoff. 1, 2, 3. Reading the opponent's breath wasn't difficult. Sensing the right moment, Johann hurled his mace like a bolt of lightning. Gasp! It was like a stone shot from a catapult. The frozen swordsman was struck by the mace and tumbled to the ground, motionless and looking seriously injured. Johann nonchalantly drew his long sword. The swordsman hesitated and retreated further. Mercenaries surrounded the area. Gasro! What do we do? Do we keep fighting this? I surrender? What are you doing? Although the defense captain was aghast and shouted, Gasro immediately held his longsword to the captain's throat. Another swordsman quickly seized the captain. The enemy's presence here meant the outer walls and gates were likely already taken. In such a situation, dying to protect the defense captain seemed less sensible than surrendering. Facing that monstrous foe, it felt certain they would die right here. You're quick-witted. Disarm them. And if they try any tricks, feel free to cut them down. Following Johann's command, the mercenaries rushed to disarm the swordsman and the defense captain. Johann, watching the struggling captain, inquired. Speak of the situation within the fortress. Shut up. I swear to God, I have nothing to say to an invader like you. Once the reinforcements arrive, you lot will. Gerdolf struck the defense captain in the abdomen. The defense captain choked and vomited what he had eaten the day before. Johann asked the swordsman. Do you know anything? We do know. A lot. These traitors. This is why you can't trust those of low birth. Even after handing over so much silver. And to think, a fencing guild would be more expensive. Still no thoughts of surrendering. Johann asked the defense captain. Instead of answering, the captain spat. Johann nodded. Kill him. So. The holding mercenary was taken aback. Clearly, he was of noble origin. Not a high-ranking noble with a fiefdom, but even a lower noble was a daunting opponent for a mercenary. Normally, they would capture, not kill. Gerdolf swung his short warhammer, smashing the defense captain's head. It didn't matter where the captain came from or what family he belonged to. Just do as told. The nickname Butcher wasn't for nothing. Having cut off the defense captain's breath, Gerdolf approached the mercenary holding him and grabbed his throat. See cough, Godolfnim. Why are you doing this? What are you doing, Gerdolf? This man didn't follow orders. No, sir. I was just startled. Let him go. At Johann's words, Gerdolf immediately released the mercenary. The mercenary gasped for air and said, I apologize, Johannim. I won't disobey orders again. Fine. You followed us this far, I won't doubt your loyalty. The mercenaries looked moved at Johann's words. Regardless, Gerdolf grabbed the next person and raised his warhammer. The swordsman panicked as Gerdolf's arm rose. Why are you doing this? I said I would talk. Ah. My apologies. This man is a loyal knight. So, what is the current situation? The walls are under attack, and the captain was about to go for reinforcements. Is the Castellan inside the fortress? Yes. Do you know his location? For now. Johann made a decision right away. We go inside. Capture the Castellan first. The soldiers waiting in Ulrika's camp realized something was amiss when they spotted a few fleeing soldiers. Isn't that them running away? What? That's ridiculous, but it's true. The guards, who had lost their way in the fog and unfortunately ran towards Ulrika's camp, screamed and ran away again. What's happening here? We need to open the gate to get in. A few knights murmured in confusion. Normally, they would have subdued the secret passage and sent mercenaries for reinforcements. Things seemed messed up, but seeing the enemies fleeing outside the castle, it seemed that was not the case. Aren't we in the middle of a battle? We can't tell because of the fog. The fog made even the attackers hesitate. Then Stephen stepped forward. We must go support them now. Chapter 61.2. The knights looked doubtful. They would have listened if it were someone else, but it was hard to accept when Stephen said it. Let's watch the situation a bit more. What if Johann dies in the meantime? So Johann is not someone who dies easily. Besides, it seems they are fighting now. Then how about we go support with the soldiers Stephen is leading? Hearing this, Suitlig offered a compromise. The knights couldn't object to sending the mercenaries Stephen brought. Returning to their camp, Suitlig spoke to Stephen with surprise in his expression. That's a decent idea. In this situation, the enemy will be too confused to attack us easily. Ah yes, I thought so too. Of course. Of course, Stephen had not thought that way. Just like when Johann returned from negotiating with Ulrika, Stephen didn't quite trust Ulrika. It was surprising, but Johann seemed to have won Ulrika's favor. It was evident from what was heard. But Stephen still feared Ulrika. If Johann were to die, it wouldn't be strange for Ulrika to break her promise. Let's go. Follow me. Fortunately, the mercenaries followed Stephen. They went to aid their employer, Johann, without question, though their faces were filled with bewilderment. Did that knight know how to fight? I don't know. I heard he's like a blind man with open eyes. Whispers from behind. Normally, Stephen would have been furious, but now in a desperate situation, he couldn't afford to lose his temper. Clenching his teeth, he led the soldiers close to the city walls, his body tense in anticipation of incoming arrows. The fog is too thick to shoot this far. Definitely. He thought this in his head, but the fear did not subside. Moreover, the top of the wall was eerily quiet. That was even more terrifying. As Stephen wondered what was happening and racked his brain, the mercenaries urged him on. You need to give an order. Do we stick close to the secret gate to enter? Or do we climb the wall? Keep it down. I'm thinking. Then, a disturbing noise echoed through the fog. It was the sound of the castle gate being lifted. What is that? The mercenaries grabbed their weapons first, but something felt off as they did. Why would those inside open the gates and come out? It was a time when they should be hunkering down inside. People emerged from the fog. The mercenaries looked only at Stephen, waiting for his command. They were waiting for an order, but Stephen was also at a loss for words. HM? Have you come to help? The one who came out of the open gate was Johann. In Johann's hand was an unfamiliar man, covered in blood. Johann's party, Ulrika, and even the guards themselves were unaware that the situation inside the fortress was in chaos. When it became known that someone had climbed over the wall in the thick fog, the guards, thinking the walls had been taken over, were terrified. While Johann was busy clearing soldiers in the courtyard, fear spread even more on the walls. In an already exhausted and starving situation, some quick-witted ones took advantage of the fog to climb down the walls and flee. Still, the situation could have been managed up to that point. But the situation worsened when the guard captain, who should have hurriedly come to calm the soldiers, was caught and killed by Johann. With the guard captain's communication cut off, the leaders of the soldiers, the 10-man captains, also panicked. When one of the 10-man captains ran away, it was the end. Like a dam bursting at its limit, the soldiers each looked for their own way to survive and fled. At that time, Johann was searching the inner fortress for the Castellan, unaware that the outside defense had collapsed. The Castellan is on the 3rd floor. Yes. Yes. Apart from the main tower, the inner fortress was a narrow space with no empty areas. Normally, the 1st floor of a tower was used as a storehouse or kitchen, and living spaces were above it. The Castellan would know more about this fortress than Johann. It wouldn't be strange if there were 1 or 2 secret passages. Johann had to rush to catch him before he was discovered. Is there a passage to escape outside? We don't know that much. The captured swordsman said with anxious expressions. With the guard captain killed in one stroke, there was no one who could guarantee their lives here. They had to show they were useful somehow. Where are you from? From Aran, in the Central Empire. That's quite far. How did you end up here? We were conscripted by the guild. Sir Karamaf sent us here. Johann was surprised at the unexpected name. Karamaf sent them? Karamaf? Have you seen his face? Of course not, we are not of the status to meet him directly. Besides, Sir Karamaf is well, it's a rumor, but there are rumors that he's seriously ill. Chapter 62.1. A serious illness. The swordsman hastily added, perhaps misunderstanding Johann's reaction of incredulity as something else. Of course, it's unbelievable that a knight like Sir Karamaf would fall seriously ill. It's a ridiculous rumor, but we are not lying. That's right. Moreover, it is said that Sir Karamaf is cursed. Madman. What are you talking about, curses? It's a real curse, I tell you. Why else would a perfectly healthy knight collapse? The rumor that Karamaf had collapsed due to a curse suggested that he had accumulated significant enmity over the years. Indeed, when suppressing the rebellion in the Western Empire, he never considered reconciliation, ruthlessly killing nobles indiscriminately. Usually, nobles involved in rebellions weren't easily executed. Even if defeated, they would lose their fiefdoms or pay reparations as a compromise. However, the emperor, relying solely on his might, chose a hard-line approach, and Karamaf acted in accordance with his wishes. Now, the feudal lords in the Western Empire were openly targeting the emperor. What are you doing? How dare? A servant working there exclaimed in shock. It was natural to be surprised seeing dozens of armed men ascending to the 2nd floor. Show your loyalty if you want to live. Yes. Led by Gasro, the swordsman, following Johann's words, stepped forward with somber expressions, holding their returned weapons. Having switched sides during the war, they had to prove themselves. Otherwise, they risked facing blades from both sides. Is the Castellan upstairs? You traitors! Do you think you'll be safe after bringing outsiders in here? You and others will be held responsible. Chwag! Even with a roughened temperament, slicing down a servant was nothing challenging. The swordsmen, having splattered blood, pointed their swords at another servant and asked, Is he upstairs? He is. He's there. Good. Let's go up. Screams echoed throughout the tower. Realizing the situation, the servants and slaves began to flee. Those who realized that dangerous enemies had entered tried to escape outside first. The mercenaries didn't bother to capture them. They had no time to waste in frivolity. Wait. Bring them back here. Confused by Johann's command, the mercenaries moved as instructed. They vividly remembered how Gerdolf had fiercely grabbed someone by the neck earlier. Why are you doing this? Please, don't do this. Don't struggle. Unless you want something broken. The mercenaries caught the fleeing servants, dressed in shabby, ragged clothes with dirty faces, nothing unusual at first glance. But that didn't seem to be the case. Johann stood in front of them. A vague intuition had made them stop. It was time to find out why. Only one of them has intact hands. At Johann's words, one of the servants turned deathly pale. Clean his face. Run away. Milord, are you? The mercenary swiftly cut down the struggling servant, then roughly wiped the face of another. The swordsman verified the face. It's the Castellan. A crafty-looking middle-aged man urgently spoke to Johann. If you let me go like this, I will speak directly to His Majesty the Emperor. I could even grant a fiefdom to everyone here. Mercenaries could become feudal lords. It was a story of great luck, indeed. Even owning a small town would make a mercenary a legend among their peers. However, everyone just smirked. None were foolish enough to believe that promise. Johann, without changing his expression, called Gerdulf. Gerdulf! Shut him up. Gua! Gerdulf silenced the Castellan. The Castellan had heard of the butcher's reputation. Gerdulf, as if proving the rumors true, swung his fist. Blood splattered, and the Castellan fell silent. Stop there. Don't kill him. We need to check outside. Are the guards surrounding the keep? Maybe we'll have to hold out in the tower. I can't see them. Still on the ramparts? Good. Let's go through the secret passage. The fog was starting to clear. Johann felt the urgency to move quickly. But when they emerged outside, they saw a courtyard completely devoid of any signs of life. No soldiers were in sight. A trap? Let's ask the Castellan what he's plotting. Seems like they really ran away. Johann checked not the secret passage, but the main gate. No soldiers were visible there either. Even for a trap, it was unusual to leave this area unguarded. Open the main gate first. Yes. Together now. No. I will open the gate. Keep watch. Normally, hoisting the gate's winch wasn't a one-person job. About a dozen soldiers were needed to lift it. The mercenaries thought to help but then stopped themselves. And Johann did exactly that. As he alone opened the gate, the mercenaries, no longer surprised, rushed through. Only the swordsman looked on as if seeing a madman. You've bravely come to help. Braver than I thought. Who? Oh, of course, that's me. Upon hearing Johann's words, Stephen hurriedly nodded his head. Fortunately, it seemed he wouldn't be hit by an arrow. Thanks to you, it went well. Send the soldiers inside to take over the walls. Stay alert. We don't know how many are still inside. And call for reinforcements. We've captured the Castellan. Captured the Castellan? Isn't that what you're holding now? Stephen wore a sickened expression. He couldn't believe that was the Castellan. For Stephen, who had only experienced treating nobility with a certain level of respect, it was shocking. He couldn't even lift his head properly. Mobilize the cavalry and capture all the servants or slaves among those escaping. We don't need the soldiers, but we must capture all of them. Understood. Seeing the Castellan, it seemed likely others might disguise themselves as servants or slaves to escape. Even though they had captured the Castellan, Johann was thorough in such matters. The Castellan twitched upon hearing this. Johann was surprised, thinking the man had been knocked out. The messenger soon arrived at Ulrika's camp. Ulrika was at a loss for words upon hearing the request for reinforcements, given that they had opened the gates, taken over the walls, and captured the Castellan. Isn't that like having already conquered the castle? The knight seemed to agree. They had thought that when they said they'd cross the walls with just a few mercenaries, they'd quietly open a secret door and call the soldiers. The late arrival of the messenger was thought to be due to complications, but they never imagined it was because they had taken the gate, the walls, and the Castellan. Issue the order. We can't be late in cleaning up after taking over the castle by ourselves. The fog was already lifting completely. Chapter 62.2. The situation within the fortress was quickly grasped. Ulrika chuckled at the fact that more than half of the defenders had fled. Then she immediately composed her expression. She pretended to be calm to maintain dignity in front of her subordinates, but the satisfaction on her face was undeniable. Johann felt a hint of humanity in Ulrika's statue-like face for the first time. That's quite adorable. What? What? Are you insane? Stephen, who was standing nearby, was startled. Was he talking about Ulrika? People have many facets, don't they? Even if Ulrika has 100 aspects, none of them would be cute. Just shut up, especially if you value your life. You should be trying to impress Ulrika Gong, not messing around like this. Johann's rebuke snapped Stephen back to reality. He was right. His life was spared not because of his own charm, but because he had impressed Johann. I know. If you want to live long, keep your head down and be observant. Breathe carefully until you can collect your money and leave. Understood. What were you discussing so earnestly? Ulrika asked with curiosity. We were discussing how the capture of the fortress was possible thanks to Ulrika Gong's leadership. The two from the Abner family looked at Johann incredulously. Ulrika regained her composure first and spoke. Such jokes don't suit a knight like you. Wasn't it a bit too harsh how you treated the Castellan after bringing him out? He's a man whose death would be insignificant anyway. If that's the case, why didn't you just kill him? It must have been troublesome to bring him out. I thought you might want to do it yourself. At Johann's question, Ulrika smiled. Don't just stand there, come to my side, knight. I want you to guard me while we inspect the fortress. I shall do so. Watching Johann ride up to stand beside Ulrika, Stephen realized he should have been more alert and joined them as well. You, get lost. Stephen obediently left, cursing Ulrika internally. Ulrika instructed her knights to keep their distance, wanting to speak privately with Johann. But why did you order the soldiers to catch the servants and slaves, instead of just the Castellan? Seeing the Castellan in disguise and hiding made me think his relatives might do the same. You wasted your time. The Castellan's relatives aren't here in this fortress. Johann, who had thought the Castellan's flinch was due to his relatives hiding, was puzzled when told otherwise. Then what was that reaction about? You did much better than I expected, knight. I doubt anyone would complain about you receiving a fiefdom. When does the army return? As soon as the cleanup is complete. There's no reason to stay here in this place during winter. We will leave a few to garrison and return to my fiefdom. Once we return, I'll take care of your fiefdom first. Seeing how the fortress was captured, it seemed unnecessary to wait any longer. No one would likely express dissatisfaction. It seems we must prepare for the Emperor's counterattack. Even so, not right now. It's still a long way off, so it's better to focus on your town first. Even for you, it's difficult to manage the town directly. When I return, I'll introduce you to some capable people who can serve as administrators. The administrators who collected taxes and managed the town were usually selected from among the educated, either free citizens or lower nobility. Frankly, neither knights nor nobles had the capability or reason to handle such detailed governance. Thank you. You can be informal with me. Like you are with Stephen. Does that mean to swear and scold? That would likely result in an immediate sword fight. No. All right. At that moment, a knight who had gone out for reconnaissance hurriedly rode into the castle gates. Ulrika Gong. Ulrika Gong. What is it? The Emperor's army is in Lobutan. Ulrika's expression changed. Lobutan was a city not far from Sangdaju Castle, reachable in 3 to 4 days northeast along the Empire's highway. Given Sangdaju Castle's location surrounded by mountains, there was only one path to approach from this side, making the intention clear. Karamaf, you damn bastard. What did you say? Nothing. Marquis Crucho waved his hand at the lieutenant. It was a signal to leave. Even though Marquis Crucho was one of the Emperor's commanders, the current situation was not good. Being a commander, he was all too aware of this. Enemies on all sides. When his house was overflowing with gold and he had many soldiers, he could wield iron fists, but now, with debts and mercenaries deserting, he had to endure. However, the Emperor did not. He tried to suppress the rebelling feudal lords with force. Marquis Crucho sighed. It was ironic for him to blame now, after he had not dissuaded the Emperor and had instead ridden the wave. When the call for help from Sangdaju Castle came, Marquis Crucho strongly advocated for support. If Sangdaju Castle fell, the western feudal lords would openly traverse the Central Empire. It was strategically different from the Southern Rebellion. The Emperor, out of pride, wanted to subdue the south first, but Marquis Crucho strongly argued and barely managed to secure troops. Chapter 63.1. If the enemy is not foolish, they will retreat. The area near Sangdaju Castle is not a good place for the attackers to hold out for long. Marquis Crucho intended to quickly drive the enemy back. The Marquis himself was also short on time. The soldiers led by the Marquis needed to be redirected to the south immediately. Recently, the Emperor has been suspecting all the surrounding vassals. The already unfavorable war situation was critically impacted by the disappearance of Karamaf. Although everyone kept silent, it was impossible to hide the truth even from the high nobles around the Emperor. There were already rumors among the nobles that Karamaf had fled due to disappointment with the Emperor. This rumor further deepened the Emperor's suspicions. It had to be ended quickly. However, the Marquis did not yet know that Sangdaju Castle had already fallen. We were lucky. Everyone in the room nodded at Ulrika's words. However, the thoughts of the Sangdaju Castle were somewhat different. A few more days late, and it would have been dangerous. Exactly. If we had been attacked with the castle behind us. It was fortunate to attack aggressively. Otherwise, they would have spent money and gained nothing. The knights and mercenary captains looked at Johann with respect. Anyone who could scale the walls and capture a castle barehanded would inevitably be respected among those who live by the sword. The commander. It's Marquis Crucho. Why would that creature, belonging among the beast folk, climb all the way up here? Ulrika looked disdainful but was not reassured. Marquis Crucho was quite a name among the emperor's vassals, famous as a commander in the southern Catalian peninsula. How do you think they'll come out? They might try to negotiate. Of course, it will be greatly disadvantageous. Laughter appeared on the knights' faces. They knew they were in a favorable position. If they hadn't captured the castle, they would have been negotiating from a disadvantage. But not now. The other side was in need. What does the Castellan think? If you show mercy, His Majesty will reward you. Really? Ulrika stood up. In her hand was a long sword. But I don't need the mercy of Cardirian. What should I do? No, actually, I'm not even sure if that person is capable of showing mercy. Having slashed the necks of nobles like that, wouldn't he cut mine too? No, no. Above all, it's you who should be seeking mercy now, not me. How dare you break the customs of surrender and attack by surprise, and now ask for mercy? Let's see Cardirian's mercy. You're. With those words, Ulrika beheaded the Castellan. Blood splattered on Ulrika's face. She spoke in a rough voice. Clean this up. Give the head to the Marquis when he comes. Tell him what he has done. Yes. Johann took out a handkerchief and handed it to Ulrika. Ulrika looked at Johann with mixed emotions and then wiped her cheek. So now there's no Castellan. Do you think they'll try to negotiate? The Castellan's relatives are still here, so they might try to use them to get the castle back. They will try to regain the castle by paying a proper compensation. Just ignore it. There's no reason to listen to such nonsense. But we can't completely ignore it. It will tarnish the honor of the Abner family. Although fights among nobles are common, killing the Castellan and occupying the castle to make it a fiefdom will cast a wary eye from other nobles nearby. As the Abner family from the west, there's no rule saying they wouldn't do the same to the central or northern nobles. So you're saying we should return the hard-won castle? Madness. This castle must stay in the hands of the Abner family. It's a strategic point. How about stalling for time? No matter who comes to negotiate, demand an absurd amount of compensation. Meanwhile, we can use the castle as much as we want. Returning the castle is an impossible task, and swallowing it without a word creates a subtly uncomfortable situation. Ulrika's retainers heatedly debated various opinions. In this regard, Johann had little to say and just sipped his drink. Johann turned his head. Suitl was gesturing for him to come out from the doorway. I saw Ulrika gone beheading someone. Knew it would happen. Isn't it self-inflicted? Exactly. Deserved to die. But where did that handkerchief come from? It doesn't match. Evelka gave it to me. Who's Evelka? I told you before. A maid who served in the mansion. Never mention that name in front of Ulrika Gong. Suitl was horrified. What madness is this knight getting into? It's not cheap, is it? I bought the handkerchief with my own money. That's not the issue. Anyway, didn't you order to capture all the servants and slaves? I did. So, while checking, I found one peculiar fellow and called him. You'll know when you see. Follow me. Johann followed Suitl outside. The captured servants and slaves were trembling in the courtyard. Although the Castellan was the one who committed the crime, usually after such conflicts, there was no distinction in who was executed. If Ulrika was in a foul mood, they would all be punished together. Fortunately, Ulrika had no intention of shedding anyone else's blood, except for the Castellans. What do you think? About what? That young one. Doesn't he resemble the Castellan? I'm not sure. Johann looked at a young servant with a puzzled expression. The servant had a rather noble face for a servant, but that didn't necessarily prove nobility. The accent was common, and the movements were unrefined. He was not someone raised as a noble from a young age. Don't remember the Castellan's face. I remember it faintly. I remember him from his youth. That one indeed resembles the Castellan. But his actions are not of a noble, are they? Could be an unacknowledged illegitimate child. Heard he oddly received the Castellan's favor. The fate of unrecognized illegitimate children was often miserable. If parents took care of them, they were very fortunate. Usually, they had to fend for themselves. Worse, they might be targeted by assassins. Infidelity might be tolerated, but producing a child was a different matter. In this respect, it was not unusual for the Castellan to keep his illegitimate child as a servant. Being a noble servant was better than living as a serf or freeman. The problem was, maybe he's just a clever servant. That's possible. So, will you just kill him? No more trouble then. Not necessary to go that far. Johann suddenly had a thought. If there were no legitimate heirs, couldn't an illegitimate child inherit the fiefdom? Chapter 63.2. Is he really an illegitimate son? That's not important. The point is, using this as a pretext, the Abner family can avoid criticism. Beheading a guilty Castellan and returning the castle to his child without any repercussions provided an unquestionable justification. Of course, this was nothing but a deception. The child of the Castellan would be given no real authority. The Abner family would control the castle and the nearby town. Ulrika looked at Johann with a surprised expression. Why do you say that? I never thought the commander could come up with such a scheme. It's nothing. I owe it to the advice of Suetgnim. The counsel of a philosopher is not for everyone, nor is it understood by all who receive it. Yes, a good plan. We must do it immediately. Hey! Prepare and dress up that son of the Castellan. Whether he was a real illegitimate son or not didn't matter. If they strongly assert it and it seems plausible, then it becomes the truth. Marquis Crucho felt a suffocating sensation in his chest. The castle has fallen. And the son of the Castellan has succeeded the position. Nonsense. The Castellan had no children. The Castellan had no children, only relatives. If the Castellan died, his brother should have succeeded him. Regardless of Marquis' anger, a neatly dressed new lord of Sangdaju Castle looked down at them from the castle walls. He was clearly just a boy. How dare they bring in such a boy after killing the Castellan and expect such an excuse to work? The former Castellan launched a surprise attack while sending a surrender envoy. Marquis Crucho clenched his teeth in anger. The opposition had annoyingly secured a moral high ground. They executed him for violating the customs of surrender and returned the family estate as they didn't intend to conquer the family. One cannot arbitrarily change the emperor's vassal. Succession is the rightful right of a vassal, according to customary law, imperial law, ecclesiastical law, and the laws of the world. But wasn't that succession forced? Then file a lawsuit. The knight, acting as an envoy, responded brazenly. Marquis Crucho had to restrain his desire to draw his sword. Filing a lawsuit would be futile as they wouldn't comply easily. Knowing it was futile, Marquis Crucho issued an ultimatum. Open the gates. I must meet the new Castellan and understand the whole situation. Are you trying to take a vassal's rightful land by force, like your lord often does? Watch your mouth. I'm not so weak that I can't kill one like you. Try if you can. The walls of Sangdaju are high, and the weather is getting colder. Let's see what you can do from outside. The envoys laughed and went inside. Unable to refute their words, Marquis Crucho despaired. Do you think we should retreat, or should we attack? Won't you retreat? I bet on attacking. Wasn't the opponent said to be an experienced commander? Ulrika looked at Johann. No matter how she thought about it, he was a unique knight. It seemed like the characteristics of many people were combined in one person. Devising strategies seemed noble or scribe-like, but the aggression and momentum in battle were that of a knight among knights. Yet, for a knight, his blood was too cold. In such situations, no knight would speak of retreating. It wasn't a matter of high walls or disadvantage. Honor, pride, and face as a knight. These were things that flowed deeply in the blood of knights, beyond any cerebral calculation. If one were to retreat just because it was disadvantageous, then there would be no reason to be a knight. Because if it were me, I would have attacked. Ulrika's words were spot on. That night, Marquis Crucho initiated an attack. It was a desperate, almost flailing attack. And that attack did not last even a week. Before a week passed, Marquis Crucho's army began to withdraw. I'm not thinking of capturing the Marquis. For that, your eyes are burning too fiercely. Unlike a Castellan, the Marquis came from a very wealthy family. He was a hostage worth a large ransom from his southern fiefdom. It was the same for Johann and the other knights. They were burning with the desire to target the retreating army of the Marquis. Don't overdo it. Overdoing always leads to trouble. I've never seen anyone fare well going against the flow of a river. I understand. Flowing water doesn't race to the front. That's a good saying. Where did you hear it? Johann didn't answer but lifted his spear. The pursuit force was mainly composed of cavalry. They would quickly follow and bite into Marquis' army. So Johann, will you lead the front? The knights proposed without needing to discuss who should go first. Stephen looked on enviously. Johann had no connections under Ulrika, nor did he have the backing of a powerful family. Yet, he had gained the recognition of all knights solely through his skill. Is this what a true knight is? Johann, standing at the forefront, drew his sword. A robust cheer erupted from the knights. It was almost time for the hunt. Chapter 64.1. Indeed, Marquis Crucho was an exceptional commander. The most difficult aspect of commanding an army was the retreat. The armies of this world were not well organized. Loyalty was even harder to find. The fact that some mercenaries were famous for their loyalty meant that other mercenaries were lacking in this respect. Thus, both mercenaries and soldiers would flee without hesitation if the army's morale was low, especially since their own lives were at stake. And now, it was rare for an army's morale to be as low as during a retreat, yet Marquis Crucho's army was retreating in an orderly manner. Marquis Crucho is an experienced commander, so this is to be expected. Upon hearing the report from the scouting knight, Johann nodded. He already knew Marquis Crucho was an outstanding commander from experience. The attack had lasted less than a week, but it was fierce. Thousands of soldiers were throwing ladders and shooting arrows. Being able to lead such a total attack with troops gathered from various places itself proved his capability. However, Marquis Crucho greatly underestimated the combat power of the army led by Ulrika. They were neither tired nor injured. Even after the siege, the soldiers remained almost unharmed. It was unthinkable that they couldn't hold their position on the walls, especially with Johann there. I would like to hear your opinions, knights. At Johann's words, the knights' faces brightened, and they began to offer various suggestions. Suggestions included launching multiple assaults with a robust cavalry of several hundred to gradually annihilate the enemy, and targeting Marquis's main force directly. Johann gathered their opinions and made a decision. Let's follow them at a distance. If the enemy's morale is low, that alone will cause many soldiers to scatter. That's a wise decision. Setting a trap under the guise of retreat was not something anyone could do. Pretending to retreat could lead to the disintegration of an army. However, Johann decided to prepare for any contingency. Suetlik had advised the same. On the first day, there were dozens. On the second day, there were hundreds. On the third day, the scattering was so widespread it was frightening to count. I apologize, Marquis. No, the commander is clever. Marquis Crucho did not feign retreat, but it was true he was laying traps. He intended to rally the remaining elite troops to annihilate the pursuers and then turn the morale around with that. However, the enemy only followed closely enough to seize an opportunity, not rushing in. This naturally brought the soldiers' morale to rock bottom, knowing that knights ready to strike were nearby. Now, it seemed there were less than 1,000 left, mostly infantry and too many conscripts. They were those who would collapse at a charge led by knights. We will charge. No. Stop. When his knights moved to act, Marquis Crucho stopped them. The enemy wasn't all knights either, except for 20 or 30, the rest were likely mounted heavy troops. But their number was in the hundreds. Marquis Crucho's cavalry, even if scraped together, amounted to only dozens. Many knights had fallen during the siege, and mercenaries deserted at night, making it hard to be confident of victory. In this era, knights and cavalry made up the bulk of warfare. Conscripts and mercenaries mostly couldn't withstand knights. Once the formation broke, it was over. Who is the knight leading them? A new face. Were such knights in the Abner family? Johann's name was already a rumor among the Marquis camp. Soldiers atop the walls, trembling with fear, had spread the rumor about the mighty knight. Initially, the knights didn't believe it, but as they were pursued, they couldn't ignore the rumor. His knight Johann of the Yates family. Said to have slain a troll in Marseille. Who? Such a knight existed? A shame not to have recruited him. Don't worry. He's young and unrefined. We can win in a direct confrontation. Marquis knights proudly declared, as true knights are never lukewarm. If possible, we should enter Louboutin without fighting. Any clash now would cause great damage. If we speed up, we're already losing men at this pace, speeding up will leave even fewer. And the enemy will start attacking. Increasing the retreat speed would only create vulnerabilities, practically inviting an attack. But Marquis, now is not the time to worry about appearances. If you're captured, the situation worsens significantly. I agree. You should escape first, Marquis. What are you saying? You mean to leave the army behind and flee? Marquis Crucho asked in disbelief, but his knights were serious. I'll stay and command. Escape tonight with the other knights, Marquis. Usually, Marquis Crucho would have rebuked them, but not now. The dilemma was too great. If he continued leading the army, they could reach Louboutin in days. Many dispersed mercenaries would likely join there for a regroup. But if the army crumbled further, even Marquis might not escape. With less than dozens left, no tricks would work. To escape first, it had to be now, while over 1,000 decoys diverted attention. Understood. Let me know once you've decided. Yes. Chapter 64.2. As night fell, both sides rested. However, while one side rested comfortably, the other trembled with anxiety. Johann approached the enemy camp with about a dozen men. The watchmen's screams were visible in the light of their torches. You sons of batches! Better to attack. If you're going to come, do it like a knight. What are you doing? The weary mercenaries struggled, but Johann ignored them. To torment the opponent without fighting. Johann could do such things as much as he wanted. The knights admired him for this. If Johann had been a dishonorable mercenary, they would have scorned such tricks as petty. But Johann was already a knight who had proven his honor. This was an amazing stratagem. Johann, harassing the enemy with Karamaf, sensed something odd. Having done this for days, he felt a sense of unease. Torches and people moving in the darkness. What's changed? Could it be? Johann shuddered at the thought that came to mind. But it seemed highly probable. Louboutin wasn't far. The Marquis could have just slipped away. Prepare to charge. Ready, sir. Though only about a dozen, they charged towards a camp of nearly 1,000, but the knights stood unfazed behind Johann. Charge! Johann realized it was time again to surrender to instinct rather than reason. His instinct now was to ransack the enemy camp with his knights. Right now. Charge! It's an attack! Attack! Soldiers screamed and scattered in all directions. The days of harassment had paid off. Their formation was barely in place. Thudding hooves echoed through the camp, and the knights' shouts rattled eardrums. They relentlessly struck down mercenaries clad only in light garments. Don't scatter, to the center. Find the Marquis. Johann was cautious, but no organized counterattack came. Instead, soldiers scattered like frightened rabbits. No one thought this assault was just a dozen men. They believed it was a total attack by those who had been pursuing them for days. Sir! Found it! The Marquis' tent was easy to spot even in the dark. It was the largest and had many torches. Arriving at it without counterattack left Johann feeling empty. Clearly, the adversary had fled. Instead, another figure on horseback appeared. I am Xenophus of the Lacehi family. State your name, adversary. Johann of the Yates family. Where did the Marquis go? Think I'd reveal that? Don't underestimate me just because I'm alone. I can take on hundreds by myself. Johann gripped his weapon tightly. There was no point in detaining a knight for questioning in such a critical situation. The opponent wouldn't know the exact way either. They were about a dozen, excluding the main force behind. It was fortunate the enemy didn't know. Otherwise, who knows what chaos would have ensued. I've heard of your exploits among the mercenaries. Let's see if you can show the same skill in front of a real knight. Xenophus charged. In the darkness, his spear tip, faintly glimmering, aimed for Johann's vital spot. With a heavy sound, Xenophus fell off his horse. Johann shouted without even looking back. The Marquis has fled. Head to the main force and order a full attack. We will pursue the Marquis. Yes. While the cavalry behind them completely crushed the remaining enemies, Johann and his knights raced forward. Karamaf. You must play a key role. Karamaf, seemingly able to see the path even in the darkness, ran without hesitation. Johann followed, eyeing the front intently. Although the enemy had started first, the gap wasn't too wide. Moreover, the enemy had to be slower than them. Nobles move with their servants and slaves in tow, after all. Johann's pursuit had also reached the ears of his target. The sound spread far in the darkness. Did you not hear the sound of a horse neighing just now? What sound? Are you tired, sir? No. Just now. The other knights had clearly heard it too. The sound of a horse's neigh coming from a distance. The pursuit team is coming. How so soon? Could the mercenaries have betrayed us? Otherwise, how could they be here so quickly? Let's fight back. The numbers are too uneven. We must create confusion. Take the Marquis away. The rest of us will scatter and deceive them. Marquis Crucho did not hesitate for long. Having already retreated, there was no turning back. I express my respect for the knight's loyalty. Let's meet in Louboutin. Not so, Marquis. Marquis left immediately. The knights dispersed and began to change direction one after another. The servants and slaves remained in place. They had no horses to escape on. The knights' division was soon known to Johann's group. Servants and slaves trembling in surrender and horse hoofs scattering in all directions. Karamaf also growled and tilted its head in confusion. Damn. Do we have to leave it to luck here? God will take care of us, sir. The knights, although not entirely believing, seemed intoxicated with victory. How could they have shattered the enemy camp and chased after Marquis without divine care? All right. Let's go. If God is watching over us, we might catch Marquis. Of course, that was not the case. Johann found only 5 knights in the direction he chased. None looked like Marquis. TSK. Those around Johann also showed disappointment. Knights had value, but they were mere substitutes for the real target. Unaware of such materialistic thoughts, Marquis knights steeled their resolve. I am Marco of the Algaro family. Reveal your identity. Johann casually wielded his weapon, ready to knock down anyone. They had the numerical advantage. Sir. Why? Do you want to confront him? That man is the son of the Marquis. Johann was puzzled by the knight's words. Isn't he from the Algaro family? Has a bastard son. In cases of noble bastards, it was common to send them to other families. It was the best scenario for bastards to still receive noble treatment. Is he a favored one like Stephen? Not really. I see. Johann was disappointed. If that were the case, he wouldn't have been brought to the battlefield like this. As Johann and the knight murmured, Marco shouted out. Reveal your identity. Johann of the Yates family. With those words, Johann charged. He intended to capture these knights since Marquis seemed to have escaped. Chapter 65.1. As Johann charged, Marco leaned back and drew his bow, pulling the string taut. Knights from the Holy Empire or Erland's kingdom were not adept with the bow. Although they learned archery as a part of their martial skills, they did not wield it as proficiently as other weapons. In this regard, the sight of the knight drawing a bow clearly indicated his origin from Catalia. With a sharp sound, a heavy impact was felt on the arm. Johann easily blocked it. Unless the situation was chaotic, it was possible to read the opponent's movements and intercept the arrow. Marco then discarded the bow and drew his sword. However, this action was meaningless to Johann. With a single strike, Johann sent the sword flying and grabbed the knight's throat, throwing him off his horse. Subduing the knight in one go, the tension among the other knights was palpable. Will you surrender? As a knight, how can I surrender without a fight? In that case, Johann had anticipated such a response. He proceeded to knock down all the remaining knights. Foolishly, the knights attempted to cross weapons with Johann. Once they engaged, Johann's immense strength caused them to lose their balance. Caught off guard by the unexpected impact, all the knights were unseated in a ridiculous manner. Afterwards, they became easy prey for the knights waiting in the wings. Defeated so cleanly that no excuses could be made, the knights acknowledged their defeat and surrendered. Marquis barely escaped with his life and fled to the city, while Ulrika's army returned with numerous spoils of war. As the enemy's army disappeared, Ulrika leisurely withdrew her forces. Leaving behind a new castellan and a few who would control him, along with a garrison to guard the castle, was sufficient. Congratulations on the great victory. The Marquis fled dishonorably. Don't worry about not capturing the Marquis. The victory is significant enough without that. Ulrika praised everyone with a satisfied voice. It was regrettable that they couldn't capture Marquis Crucho, but the complete destruction of his army was an unexpected achievement. Johann led the pursuit personally, which had raised some expectations, but such a result was beyond anticipation. The disappearance of the army led by Marquis Crucho was one thing, but the impact of this victory on the surroundings was even greater. The other feudal lords of the empire would surely make their judgments upon seeing the strength and influence of the Abner family. After meeting Countess Abner and discussing rewards, everyone can rest easy. At Ulrika's words, everyone showed expressions mixed with anticipation. War was heaven for the victors, starting with the wages and including the division of spoils obtained in battle. You've worked hard. Have you brought the knights? One of them claims to be Marquis' illegitimate child. Will he fetch a good ransom? Maybe not. Perhaps the other knights might be more valuable. Selling just their armors and weapons should cover the ransom. Johann clicked his tongue at Suitlug's words. I thought he might be favored like Stephen. It's rare for an illegitimate child to receive such treatment. What should we do if we can't get a ransom for him? Handle it as you see fit. Keep him imprisoned, release him, entrust him to another noble. Executing seems a bit much. Anyway, don't expect too much for a ransom. Knights often carry their wealth on their bodies. Besides, you've gained a lot from this war already, haven't you? Suitlug looked around. The camp was bustling, possibly due to the victor's return. The constant arrival of merchants and the coming and going of travelers were evident. Before spring comes, you should rest and prepare for the next season. I might be an uninterested wizard, but you're a young and ambitious knight. I'm not that ambitious. Don't talk nonsense. Have you made any plans? At Suitlug's words, Johann nodded. From the previous campaign to this war, Johann had earned a considerable fortune due to his victories. The ransoms of Baron and Stephen, the goods Doris had, the bounty for rogue subjugation and troll blood, the tax rights of the town, and rewards from the siege. Adding all this up, the total came close to 1,000 Empire gold coins. He might not get all of it at once, but it was almost like having the annual income of a feudal lord, castellan, or a baron in one go. The largest part was, of course, the ransoms of Baron and Stephen, earning hundreds of gold coins at once. In comparison, the troll blood and reward seemed minor. The town's tax rights were significant but had clear limits, being a small town. It was clear why knights were so eager for war. Ransom. Wars where ransom could be legally extracted were opportunities for social advancement and business. I did want to build a castle like the Sangdaju or Abner families. A castle? That money is nowhere near enough. Suitlug was incredulous at such an absurd idea. Building a proper stone castle would take years and about 10 times more gold. What would be the point of building one? I know. And it seems pointless anyway. If a castle was really needed, it might be different, but the place Johann was due to receive didn't require one. Building a castle there would be excessive. You could build a large mansion instead. If it's made of wood, it would be much cheaper and faster. Suitlug cautiously opened his mouth, wondering if his words were too harsh. What was the point of fighting as a knight? For fame, obviously. It would be a grave insult for a young and spirited knight to live in a small house after rising in status by receiving a fiefdom. No, not really. But Suitlug still didn't understand Johann. Johann didn't care much about such things. Building a mansion in his fiefdom to show off his wealth and power was what other nobles and knights dreamed of, not Johann. His wish to build a castle was simply to withstand enemies if attacked. He abandoned the idea, thinking it better to give up the town than fortify it with walls. Really not interested? I never planned to stay long in the town anyway. What good would come from pioneering a town that barely produces a dozen gold coins a year? And Johann also lacked confidence in that area. It would be better to wander around and earn gold during that time. So, what I thought was to hire more mercenaries. Chapter 65.2. Now that the war is over, a lot of mercenaries will likely leave. Johann planned to choose well-armed ones among them to hire. It would be even better if they were cavalry. That's not a bad idea. Suetlig was honestly impressed with Johann's words. The idea wasn't incredibly genius or innovative, but it was remarkable to come up with such a thought in this situation. While other knights might be excited to just throw around gold, Johann was unshaken and already preparing for the next task. The situation in the empire was becoming increasingly chaotic, and since Johann was already involved, the more soldiers, the better. Suetlig had been worried that Johann might become arrogant or make mistakes due to his obsession with gold. It seems he had become quite close to this young knight. But seeing Johann, he realized that such worries were unnecessary. The only worry is, after going to the trouble of hiring mercenaries, if there's no one to call them. That shouldn't be a concern. Suetlig asserted. The achievements of this siege would spread faster than the troll extermination in Marseille. The problem was under what pretense to call them, not the lack of people to call. It seems the delegation approaching is from Count Jarpen's house. They must be busy preparing for marriage. Thanks to our victory, it can be done with smiling faces. Suetlig hesitated in his speech. It seemed that Count Jarpen's house was quite interested in Johann. What would they think of this expedition? The members of the diplomatic delegation were initially overwhelmed by the abundance of news, then became confused in the middle, and eventually accepted it. Are you joining under the Abner family? Well, I am making a vassalage contract. Essentially, the relationship between a vassal and a monarch was business-oriented. Loyalty in exchange for a piece of land without expecting to risk one's life was not anticipated. The only obligation of a vassal was to serve for a certain period. However, regardless of that, the perception from the outside was different. Becoming a vassal essentially meant siding with the Abner family of the West. How should we handle this matter? The members of the Jarpen family murmured among themselves. Johann asked, appearing puzzled. Is there a problem? Well, as you know, the Count intended to ask Sir Johann for the knight initiation ceremony, right? Yes. I kept quiet until the details were finalized, but now that I have a definitive answer, I can tell you. It's Duke Bredoux. Duke Bredoux. Even Johann, who had been in a remote village, knew the name of this great feudal lord. One of the empire's 12 electors and the ruler of a significant territory in the southeast of the empire. Receiving the knight initiation ceremony directly from Duke Bredoux held immense significance. Being knighted by one of the 12 electors meant that even if Johann went alone to the emperor's fiefdom, he would have enough influence to deter and hesitate any adversary. Amidst his confusion, Johann collected his thoughts and asked. Isn't Count Jarpen quite friendly with the Erland's kingdom? Ah. I see what you mean. It's because of the Abner family. The Count has some relations with them, but they are not that close. What Count Jarpen trusted was Duke Bredoux. Johann pondered. If he accepted the fiefdom as it was, the chance of receiving Duke Bredoux's knight initiation ceremony might slip away. Those under the Duke would likely oppose it. Having a consistent source of income, even if small, was crucial. As Johann pondered, Suetlig, who was listening, spoke up. Do you want both? Of course, wouldn't I want both? If you had been interested in flaunting your status as a feudal lord, you wouldn't have said that, but if it's too much of a burden, just accept the rights. If you don't make a vassalage contract, the Duke won't have anything to say about it. Upon reflection, Johann realized that managing and ruling over the townspeople held no real meaning for him. He wasn't the type to enjoy ordering people around for various tasks. It's a good solution, but would Ulrika Gong allow it? Of course, Ulrika Gong might be dissatisfied. But there's no such thing as absolute in this world. Everything changes depending on how you talk and persuade. Although Suetlig said this, Johann found it hard to believe. From Ulrika's perspective, it seemed like a losing deal. Not making a vassalage contract meant not receiving the due service from a subject. It would only weaken an already tenuous contractual relationship. I don't think it will work. Well, since you're the one who wants both, shouldn't you be the one to figure it out? Persuade Ulrika Gong. Even without a vassalage contract, promise loyalty with the honor of a knight. Johann looked dubious. He didn't think Ulrika, who was not an asshole, would believe such superficial words. Give it a try, Sir Johann. What's there to lose? Right, Sir Johann. However, Count Jarpen and his people seemed to think this was the only chance, urging Johann on. They wanted to ensure he received an appointment from the Duke by any means. All right, he'll give it a try. But don't get your hopes up too high. The heir is something to be proud of. Everyone nodded at Countess Abner's words. The achievements established by Ulrika were indeed worthy of such remarks. Sir Gerdolf, I have heard of the achievements you have established. Thank you. I am considering sending you to Sangdaju Castle for an assignment. Ino smiled contentedly. There had been a sense of fulfillment in following Johann along with Gerdolf. Sangdaju Castle, being a newly conquered fiefdom, required many talents. Becoming one of them was both an honor and a profitable opportunity. I apologize. Is that so? If you dislike it, there's nothing to be done. Ino's eyes widened in surprise. To decline such an offer. Chapter 66.1. It was embarrassing, but what was said couldn't be taken back. Countess Abner was not generous enough to tolerate an interruption at this moment. Under Countess Abner, there were knights eager for opportunities, and Gerdolf was just one of them. Ino fidgeted nervously with his fingers, but Countess Abner scoffed inwardly. Everyone thought similarly upon seeing Ino and Gerdolf. They thought of a foolish son being looked after by his father. However, Countess Abner's thoughts were slightly different. Ino was timid, greedy, and narrow-minded. He was not a knight fit for great responsibilities. Gerdolf seemed better by comparison. On the surface, he might seem foolish, but his persistence and straightforwardness were virtues not easily found. Seeing Gerdolf, it seemed likely he would follow a knight named Johann. Countess Abner decided to allow this generously. After all, she owed Johann. With this victory, envoys are already arriving. They're probably trying to align with us once the emperor dies. At Countess Abner's words, everyone's face lit up with smiles. A loser of the West and a great feudal lord. This was the position the Abner family was aiming for. Let's dedicate this victory to the gods. May the glory of the gods be eternal in our family. May the glory of God be eternal to the family. Countess Abner called out a few knights who had distinguished themselves and awarded them with prizes, and then dismissed the people. Now only Ulrika was left. You worked hard. It was just something that had to be done. No need to be too humble. It was a great victory, even if the situation was favorable. The Countess had expected to capture the castle after a tedious siege, but the Marquis's intervention and defeat were all unexpected. It would be better to rest until the daughter of the Jarpen family arrives. If the person to be married keeps running around, the Jarpen family will be uncomfortable. I will do that. You can take your time finding a child. You can adopt a suitable man from our family or bring one from somewhere. I won't think about it for a while because my body is getting heavy. That's right. You're not the type to enjoy yourself by making lovers. Be sure to warn the daughter of the Jarpen family as well. It is free to enjoy, but if you give birth to a child outside, that child will not be able to enter the family. Of course I know that much, don't I? Knowing and remembering are different. You'll know when you get married too. Ulrika was annoyed by Countess Abner's mocking words. What a way to talk like she's been married a few times. Only the person who inherited the blood of the Abner family can continue the family name. That's all you need to remember. He'll congratulate you on your happy marriage in advance, as he'll be busy in the future. Thank you. And thank you for forgiving Stephen. I didn't forgive him. Thank you for not killing him. I'm proud of you. Yes. Ulrika nodded and stepped back outside. Conversations with the Countess always evoke conflicting, complex emotions. As she cleared her head and stepped outside, she suddenly thought of Johann. Could he be planning to explore the town right now? Do you think I'm going to accept that proposal? I'm sorry. I'm prepared to accept your refusal. Upon hearing Johann's words, Ulrika fell deep in thought. Surprisingly, she was not angry, even though she was on the verge of losing something of hers. Why? What? Oh, no. Sorry. I was just talking to myself. Honestly, it was a situation Ulrika had to acknowledge as well. Unless Johann was going to spend his life as a rural feudal lord, it was definitely better to receive the appointment from Duke Bredow if he intended to keep fighting and moving forward. It wasn't a visible asset. However, it would prove to be immensely powerful in the fights and life ahead. If he refused here, Johann would give up the fiefdom and leave. In the end, there was only one decision to make. Whether Ulrika would just let him go or do something believing in the distant future. Okay. I'll arrange all the rights of Heincut and the neighboring town and give them to the Duke. Johann was greatly surprised. I might not be a feudal lord, but it's practically the same. Heincut currently has no administrator, but if we send one from the neighboring town, it won't be much different. Is that okay? As Johann looked bewildered, Ulrika felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. Why? Thank you. Consider this town a payment for your loyalty. You are an honorable knight, aren't you? Johann might not have been particularly honorable, but he wasn't tactless enough to say that now. Johann nodded his head. Chapter 66.2. It's done. Really? It seems that Ulrika Gong also has a broad perspective. To yield like this for a young knight. The people of Count Jarpen's house said so, but Suitlig shook his head no. Being still young, his view of the world was soft and malleable. Could it be? That's good. Can we now depart for the Duke's territory? Johann nodded his head. If he could receive the appointment, there was no need to wait long. It was enough to depart immediately with a few people from Count Jarpen's house and the letters. Wait. Don't we have to pass through the southern part of the empire? Should we hire more soldiers? From what Hez heard, the southern part of the empire was a fierce situation between the emperor's faction and a coalition of rebellious feudal lords. For Johann, there was no choice but to be vigilant. No need to worry about that. They won't fight much in this winter, and if there's an army, just avoid it. You can go by visiting cities unrelated to the emperor. And honestly, it's unlikely they'll come after you alone. At Suitlig's words, Johann felt slightly embarrassed. It was certainly true. To the nobles of the emperor's faction, Johann was just a knight not worth paying attention to. They won't chase him even if he passes through the south. He just had to pass quietly. If there are many, it will draw more attention. About a few dozen skilled and loyal people will be enough. The mercenary captains had already somewhat discussed this. When Johann expressed his intention to become the new employer, the mercenaries were overjoyed. They had to find a new master by next year. For them, a knight like Johann was a welcome change, not an incompetent employer. It was already a legend among them that he had demolished the enemy camp with just a dozen knights. He'll prepare by selecting well-armed riders. Will you come with us, Suitgnim? That was my plan. Oh. What's with that reaction? I owe a debt, so I should do at least that much. I thought it was all over with the magical fog. If it ends just because you think so, how easy would that be? That's why promises are scary. In return, move along the Eipel River when we go along the south. I need to recover some secrets. Even for a wizard like Suitlig, summoning fog was no easy task. He needed to recover his strength near the river for a while. And it would be good to take Stephen with us. Yes? Hez from the Abner family. It's a convenient name to use wherever you go. Ah. Johann nodded his head. Indeed, the lineage Stephen possessed would serve as a convenient proof of identity wherever they went. I thought all the problems were resolved, but an unexpected issue caught Johann by the ankle. It was Marco and the 4 knights he had caught before. I understand the family can pay the ransom. He'll release the knights since we've taken their weapons. When a knight is defeated, their equipment becomes the property of the victor, and they must pay a customary ransom to be released. However, Marco and the 4 knights stated that their families were too humble to afford the ransom. Johann wanted to release them as punishing them seemed unnecessary and there was no reason to keep them captive, but that's not possible. Then what do you propose? I will follow you and earn the ransom. Please wait until then. Johann thought this was some bullshit talk, but the others around didn't seem surprised. It was a decision that made sense, considering a knight's honor and dignity. If the captor releases a knight without a ransom, how would the knight maintain their dignity? Paying the ransom proudly was the way to uphold a knight's honor. You want to work while following me? Yes. It wasn't a bad idea. 5 knights would be good in a fight. The problem was, cautious by nature, Johann was a bit uneasy about having the Marquis's illegitimate son in the group, not knowing what he might do. Sir Marco, you honor your name. Sir Johann. It sounds like a fair proposition. But the others showed no concern. The fact that he was the Marquis's illegitimate son seemed to bother no one. Johann felt a gap in this regard. But Johann already knew. Saying this would only lead others to respond? Or, then, I will accept your loyalty until the ransom is gathered. We will follow your orders until then. And so, the group was formed. Dozens of mercenaries escorting a member of Countess Abner's family and the Marquis Crucho's illegitimate son, a strange mix in the group. And Gerdolf too. Gerdolf, stark naked, suddenly appeared before the group departed, stating his wish to join. Johann was slightly surprised but nodded. Gerdolf seemed more trustworthy than the other questionable knights. But did you tell Serino? It's fine. You did tell him, right? It's fine. When Johann heard that Marco was an illegitimate son of the Marquis family, he expected a character like Stephen. However, Marco was polite and cautious. He asked for permission when going on reconnaissance and took the lead with other knights in establishing the fiefdom. Johann was very surprised by this behavior. He asked Suidlig. That knight is more polite than I thought. Let me ask the opposite, what kind of personality did you expect? Arrogant and impudent. Sometimes you say really strange things. How would he have survived so far if an illegitimate child had such a character? Indeed. Illegitimate children had to live humbly. Those who were arrogant and unruly did not live long. Stephen, unaware that Johann was cursing him, was mingling and chatting among the mercenaries and slaves. Surprisingly, he fit in well in such settings. Sir, thank you for returning the weapon. How can a knight fight without a weapon? Johann responded simply to Marcos' gratitude. He had taken the knight's equipment, but Johann was not cruel enough to make them fight unarmed. You handle the bow, do they often use it in the south? We use it more often than Empire knights, but not that frequently. Marco spoke modestly. The bow was a good weapon, but not highly preferred among knights. A knight should charge into enemy lines on horseback, not just stand back and shoot arrows. Actually, I continue to use it because I'm accustomed to it from my youth, but I frequently use other weapons as well. Marco explained, not wanting to be misunderstood as someone who only knew how to use a bow. However, Johann was not the type to fuss over such things. Could you teach me a bit about the bow? Really? Johann had learned from Hunter Joseph, but he saw no harm in learning more, especially since their styles would differ. Marco seemed pleased at a knight like Johann asking him to teach archery, showing a slightly excited expression. Johann suddenly felt sorry for Marco. People who had similar childhoods could recognize each other. Marco, like Johann, must have been very observant and grown up significantly. Probably even more so than Johann. Your stance is good. You've practiced a lot. I thought you would handle the bow well, given your strength. You could use a stronger bow, I don't have one to offer. Johann lightly released the bowstring. The arrow flew heavily and embedded in a tree. It wasn't bad, considering he hadn't shot in a while. It wouldn't hurt to train the others as well. The mercenaries should have crossbows, right? A crossbow is a crossbow, and a bow is a bow.